welcome to Season 2 of Pasco Podcast, a series where we discuss leadership and public service. We'd like to thank our sponsors, the 550,000 plus residents of Pasco County, as represented by the Board of County Commissioners. It's through their trust and empowerment of our workforce and leadership team that we're able to bring you this podcast. We created this podcast to help public servants build leadership skills and leverage them for success by sharing the experiences of our peers.
Hi, I'm Dan Biles, and welcome to our 14th episode of Pasco Podcast. Join us today is our Utilities Director and soon-to-be Veteran Services Director, Rob Marin, and then our Utilities Engineering Director, Charles Cullen. So welcome to today's show. Appreciate you joining me today, and look forward to kind of having a conversation about leadership and public service and some of the things we do here. So let's just get started a little bit with, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and then how you came to Pasco?
Sure. My name is Rob Marin, as Dan said. I've been with Pasco for 6.5 years. I was in the military for 30 years, originally from California, and been in the Navy for 30 years, and I retired and decided my wife wanted to come to our hometown, so we came to Newport Richey, and soon got a job here at Pasco with utilities, and I've had a great time here.
No, so let's be specific about the Navy time. You actually captained the ship, right?
Yes, sir. I like to say I was a sailor, but I was given the opportunity to command 2 ships.
Right.
So I was very, very proud of that.
Yeah, and I know we've had some conversations outside of that, how that influences your leadership style and whatnot.
Yes,
so Charles?
Hello, I'm Charles Cullen. I've been with the county also 6.5 years. I think Rob beat me by a couple of weeks. Prior to that, I was in the consulting business in utilities and served a lot of utilities on the private sector. And really like that ownership that the public sector got to have of those projects and owning it and directly serving the citizens. So,
right, and how kind of the utility system impacts the whole community, if you will. So, all right. So kind of as we get into this, and we'll kind of bounce around and talk through things, tell us a little bit about your leadership philosophy and kind of how you lead teams. Either one.
I'll start. Yeah. So I think the biggest part is communication. It's the hardest thing we do, and it's the most important thing we do, because the folks know what they need to do. They're all professionals, and so our job is basically to give them the tools and ability to do what they're capable of doing. And then you have to be really adaptive. I don't think there's a single way to lead people, because even within the organization, you have to adapt to where you are and level of maturity as an organization, as people, as you coach them.
Right.
So,
no, really good. No, so communication is kind of a key, right? And we're a large organization. You all both run large pieces of that. That's one thing we can't do enough of, and never seem to ever do enough of, right?
And the people think communication, I got to be able to explain things properly, but it's the listening part that's very important. And I can kind of give you an example. If let's just say Dan's my friend, and I'm talking to Rob and said, Dan's really been helping me out. I'm in a hard time, and he's a great friend. Take a different scenario where Dan does the exact same thing, but I have no problems. Life is good for me. I asked Rob, Dan's been asking me if I need help a lot. Am I doing something where it looks like I need help? It's kind of odd. Right. He went from a great friend to someone that I'm a little bit concerned about.
Right.
and even as leaders, that's very easy to do if you're doing the exact same thing.
No, that's a great example. Great example. Yeah. Thanks. Yeah. Rob? So
I agree with everything Charles said. But as far as myself, I'm all about proficiency and being efficient. And if I had to narrow my leadership philosophy, of course, being a military guy,
right,
I'd have to say there's 2 answers. There's a tactical right. answer. On the tactical side, I'm a intent-based leader.
Right.
But in order for that to be successful, your folks have to have the right tools and the right training. Otherwise, bad decisions are going to be made. Right. And on the strategic side, my goal is to be a transformational leader. You want to inspire my teammates to perform at a higher level, to seek a higher sense of being. And so that's my goal. My goal is transformational leadership.
Right. Yeah. And that's, that's a great great goal, and not easy to do.
Right.
Right. I mean,
Exactly.
It takes a lot of effort and work, and some of it not even directly to the issue. Right. You kind of have to work other means to get there.
Correct.
So as you went through your career, how and when did you kind of think through and decide, I really enjoy leading teams or leading people, and I want to be a leader?
So for myself, as a kid, I really enjoyed reading books about war at sea.
Right.
And I really enjoyed John F. Kennedy books, being a young naval officer to, his adventures as a OIC officer in charge of patrol craft and all the things he did out there and inspiring his team. And so as soon as I graduated from high school, I joined the Navy as a sailor. Soon after, received a scholarship to go to UCLA, got my commission. Shortly after being on a few ships, I realized command at sea is what I wanted to do. I wanted to lead sailors on a ship out at sea.
Right. And ship captains are kind of this unique thing, right? Because there was a time at which the captain went off and you never heard back from them, right? Until they came back.
Correct.
Right. The communication we have today is completely different. But Navy captains still have a lot of that autonomy.
Still do. Yes. Sometimes it could get to your head, but you want to make sure you stay focused on, the real goal is you got to take care of the little guy.
Right. Yeah, that frontline employee.
A lot of, mothers and fathers are trusting you to take care of their 18 and 19-year-old.
Right.
And that should be your focus.
Yeah, no, that's great. And we, while they're not necessarily 18 or 19 that people are trusting, we still have people's family work for us every day. And so we still need to treat them the same way, right? Yeah. So Charles?
Yeah, I'd say, entering my career, especially being in what we call, I almost call it multidisciplinary engineering, in that you're working for a utility, but you have folks that specialize in structural stuff and automation, and this is highly specialized things that you almost speak your own language. Mm-hmm. And so you have a shared vision, a shared project to work on, but you're very different people, and you need to pull that together and have a group success. And I think going through that effort early on and enjoying it, right, is part of what. So
and engineers are a little different kind of people to deal with, right?
And
I can say that as an engineer, right?
Yeah. And that goes back to the communication being an artist. That's not our. We're not known for being the best at that.
No, there's a reason I'm an I, right? So in terms of leadership, you kind of look back on your career and where you've been. What's kind of been the biggest influence? Who's been the biggest influence, and how have they impacted your life and what you do and how you lead?
So like most of us, our parents are our initial influence. And as I mentioned later on, as I was growing up, reading those books on John F. Kennedy. And later on, if anyone knows me, they know that I always have
wooden
pyramid of success nearby,
yeah.
And his book on observations of life.
Right.
I always keep those close, and I think all of us would love to be that charismatic leader like Sir Richard Branson, who can, but not many people can do that.
Right.
But if I had to pick one person, I would have to say President Lincoln.
Okay.
I mean, he defined transformational leadership. He was the perfect leader during a very difficult time. As a transformational leader, you have to listen. You have to adapt. You have to inspire, and very important, you have to hold people accountable. And he was able to master all those tools.
Yeah, he definitely held people accountable.
Definitely.
I can't remember how many generals he went through.
Correct.
Reading Doris Kearns' book, Team of Rivals, one that's, I don't know, a couple inches thick.
Excellent book.
But excellent book on all the details and how he led as president, but also before then, right, in his development over his career.
Correct.
So now usually, I'm always, I don't know why I'm surprised when people say it's one of their parents, because that's the biggest influence in our life for the first, 16, 18 years of life or longer. But yeah, Lincoln is one definitely look to, especially reading some of the great history on how he led people. And so, Charles?
I also turn to kind of history and less so individuals than I like to look at a more group dynamic and group leadership. And So I think back to the founding of our country. And right now, it's very common to say the servant-based leadership is a new concept, and it may be in business. But let's compare that to what was the kind of a battle cry, if you will, of the revolution, and it was no taxation without representation. And what did that really mean? That means someone far away is trying to tell us what to do. They don't know what's important to us. But it wasn't the tax. I mean, we still have taxes now that we're arguing about, what's the right level and stuff like that. It was, think about where we could have been if instead of you're going to pay this stamp tax, this, other taxes, and you're going to like it, we have this amount of money to raise because we got to have all these things functional. How do you think that we should do this? Right. Would we even have a country now? It's kind of interesting to look at that dynamic.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. You mentioned servant leadership, and when manufacturing became involved in the Industrial Revolution, we kind of went away from that in industry, right? Everybody just became a piece of the machine, and we've seen on the business side, a re-engagement of how do we engage our people. They can think too. They're not just automations on an assembly line, but outside that, small business, other organizations have always really used the servant leadership model, although they don't necessarily call it that.
Correct.
And we don't necessarily call it that a lot here because I don't like necessarily the buzzword. Yeah, I like all the attributes, right? Let's act like that, and then people say that's what you do, as opposed to that's what I do. Now let's go see if I act like that, right? And so no, I really like that because that's kind of one of the models, and you get that a lot from history, and you go any book, and I'm not sure we have many charismatic leaders here. I don't put myself in that category, and in my vision of the charismatic leader is Patton, and how he did it, and that's just a different style from the way we operate, right? Not that it's wrong, it's just different, right? So, so as you look back kind of on your career, what are some leadership lessons that you'd kind of like to share, some successes you've seen and challenges that you've overcome through good leadership?
So on the varsity level of leadership, you don't really learn or know a leader until the shit hits the fan.
Right.
It's those are the times when you really learn about a leader. A leader, you can't, when that happens, you can't let your troops see you sweat. You can't panic, and you have to trust that all your training is going to be put to good use. Probably one of the best recent examples in a movie is Greyhound with Tom Hanks. Mm-hmm. Wow, just some great examples. Here he is, a young captain leading a convoy of ships across the Atlantic, and from his little destroyer, he's getting a torpedo fight with multiple submarines. And of course, every great battle has to be in rough seas.
Right, of course.
And you can see him make these decisions, life and death decisions. And every once in a while, he'll glance back, and you can see the troops in the pilot house, all eyes on him, because they realize, the captain's not panicking. If the captain's not sweating, things are going to be fine. And so that's a sign of a very, very good leader. Other examples, lessons. From, in my humble opinion, is at a very young age, I learned that you have to keep a folder of leadership nuggets. And this is my leadership little leadership toolbox that I keep now. And every time you hear someone spout a leadership nugget, or you read something or you see something, I just jot them down and I toss them in it used to be a folder, but now it's a metal box. And then whenever I have a chance, I get down and I add it either to my philosophy or add it to my personal standards on how to do business. And that has helped me because there's been several times where it's not going to be the perfect scenario when you get to a leadership position. It's not going to be when you're rested and ready. It may be, you may be tapped on the shoulder to get in the game, and you've got to make the best of it. And you can't start getting ready when it's time to go in the game. You've got to be that backup quarterback that's ready to go. When the coach sends him in, the entire playbook is open, and he's going to be playing like he doesn't want to give up that position. Right. So you got to
so build the muscle memory, the leadership muscle memory,
exactly.
if you will, so that when the situations are there and you can't think, they come naturally because you have the muscle memory there.
Right.
Yeah. So another great Tom Hanks movie is Saving Private Ryan.
Correct.
Which that's a tough one to watch, but it is really, really good for that. So, so Charles?
Yeah, I would say one thing that I think is important, and I see in folks that develop themselves, because that's the hardest thing. It's sometimes a challenge to coach other people, but that's self-reflection and saying, hey, I need to improve on these things is quite often difficult. I'm not sure exactly why, but and challenging, especially commonly held beliefs. And I'll give you a specific example. I don't micromanage is a very common phrase. Substitute that word micromanage with train.
Right.
Because a lot of training and onboarding is very micromanagement level, and it's very necessary. So, challenge anyone to say, when someone shows up to the job, I'm not going to show them where to file things. I'm not even going to show them where the restroom is. I'm not a micromanager. And that's easy, and there's comfort in there. Now, that's a very simple example, but there's a lot more complex examples that we need to always challenge ourselves and make sure we're developing those.
Right. Yeah, I was working in an apartment, my first local government place, and we had somebody come in to try to help with leadership and streamline processes. And she made the statement, people only learn here by running into the trees. And what she meant by that is nobody knows the right processes to do anything, so you only learn by doing them and then doing them wrong, which is the wrong way to do it. We didn't have any SOPs, and so we had to develop a lot of that stuff. But just that point of you let people learn here by running into trees is not the right way to do it, not the right way to train. Somebody needs to know that stuff. And then there's a transition period out of that, right? I mean, when I was an young engineer, my boss would review all the detail, right? And the more I did it, the less he'd review, and the less he'd review. And then one day I'm just stamping on myself. He wasn't reviewing anything, so there's a process there to do that. So kind of to think through that a little bit, we had to deal with something that was pretty unique a couple of years ago when the pandemic hit, right? And we're still at the tail end of that. So how did that, none of us planned for that. I mean, we plan for hurricanes here, and we train for hurricanes, and we deal with hurricanes, but none of us. So how did, the operations, you had different issues to deal with in operations than you had in engineering, right? Two different ways to work. So how did you work through that from a leadership perspective?
So initially, working with Charles, we executed like it was a hurricane at the very beginning. We manned our folks in our utilities EOC, and we just worked through the issues on how to properly keep our folks safe while also serving our customers. Came up with some great ideas. For example, our customer service, the way we handle customer service now, some ideas that were brought up by the team, we're now using those as business now. That's our business process. And we've taken surveys, and our customer service surveys have actually improved. Our troops perform magnificently out in the field. They perform like it was a regular day. Our engineering team, our inspectors, we brought in the right folks. We took the proper precautions in the office, and I think the team performed extremely well.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, it didn't matter what happened. We had to deliver clean water to our customers, because if we don't have clean water, we don't have a county very long, right? And so, we could have let a lot of other things shut down. We couldn't shut down that, right? So.
And I would say, on that gets back to maybe the muscle memory of the team knowing what they need. This is a unique situation, but they're used to that. Here's what I need to be successful in my job, and teaming up with IT to get the WebEx and a lot of those tools so that we're still in the same level of communication that lets us be successful. But there was no, now I've got to ask for things. That was part of the routine. That's part of how we do business. So while it was a unique situation, the steps that took to make it successful were not unique at all. And
Right.
That's where the team really excelled.
Yeah, so a lot of the muscle memory from the leadership, and then how to work together and collaborate and make sure that we're still delivering the product to our customer that they not only need but demand, right? So no, it's great. So as you work with your team, and as you move on and through different stages, how do you continue to build your leadership skills, and then in both professional and personal, how do you continue to build those?
I'd say the biggest thing is, we have some formal training and stuff. I'm kind of a hands-on guy, and I think we're very lucky to have the type of organization we do. The most I learn is from my colleagues, whether it be other directors, managers. There is so much information there. There's not been a time where I've said, hey, I have this challenge, and we've had plenty of challenges. And how would you handle this? How do you handle this? And the knowledge is there. I mean, it is absolutely, it's awesome to see.
Right, because we've thrown some crazy things at y'all
yes.
over the last few years, right?
Yes.
We've acquired a utility system that wasn't necessarily on its best legs, right? We're growing, like crazy, like corn, that you have to deal with, right, from both an operations perspective and from a development and construction perspective. So not a lot of rest time.
Correct.
So,
and as far as myself, it's no secret that I'm not a young person anymore. I'm getting towards the end of my working career, but I've had the unique opportunities of before you go to command at sea, the Navy allows the prospective captain to select any training or leadership schools that they would like to attend. So I picked University of Virginia for a 2-week seminar on leadership. Fantastic opportunity. I also went to the Naval War College for a couple of weeks of not only do you listen to leaders and you read about leadership, you get quiet time to work on your philosophy and how you want to run business. It's time that you won't be able to buy back. Right. And so I am going to use those opportunities plus my experience and looking forward to my new team of veteran service officers, listen to how they run business and combine that with my experience, make incremental changes to improve how we manage and help out our veterans and their families. So I'm going to use that experience.
Yeah, and so you're going from, area of our line of business where we have to deliver clean water, and then we clean up wastewater and deliver reclaimed water and all the other things we do in the utilities, which are vitally important. And you don't have a city without that, or a county without, or urban development, residential development without that. To serving our veterans, another group, a community that is vitally important to the country, in a team that has actually performed pretty well.
Correct.
And done a lot of pretty tremendous things over the years, and so, one, we're glad to see that transition. Not to see that you leave utilities, but to see that you're staying with the county and to help in another area and to continue to serve, our residents. So,
if I could say one thing about utilities, I just, the 6.5 years with utilities, the troops, my colleagues, it was a fantastic opportunity. I'm very proud of everything we accomplish. I've got to thank Bruce and Mike for giving me these opportunities.
Well, let's don't thank Mike. Okay, we can thank Mike.
But I'm just so proud of those troops.
They do great work.
They do fantastic work.
They do fantastic work. I mean, I think we all did a customer service survey not too long ago and just got rave reviews over the work that they do.
Yes.
Right. And Charles, you talked about communication, and that's kind of the hardest group to communicate with, right? Those frontline troops that are really the vast majority of our organization and the ones that actually touch more of our customers than anybody. And yet we have to continue to work on both listening to them and then making sure they understand what's going on too. So, so how do you, as you're working through your team, how do you raise, young leaders and new leaders and develop them, and help them grow into their leadership skills and leadership abilities over time?
So for example, in utilities, we developed, working with the managers, directors, and the troops. We developed several programs from our operator training program, but the finest example is probably our supervisor training program, because we found that we were sending these young, very energetic, dedicated folks from the field to all of a sudden they were supervisors, and they may have not had the necessary skills to succeed. So we brought them into the classroom, and we provided training from more experienced supervisors. We provided academic books and videos, and we really saw an improvement in our young supervisors. So that has helped a lot. One little thing I tell my young officers, supervisors, is I always tell them, always, and it sounds silly, but it has worked. Always check the most remote bearing. And that goes for both material and for your troops. Talk to the most junior person to see if they're getting the message. The communication that Charles talked about earlier, you can communicate, but if it's not getting to the most remote bearing, if that most remote bearing is not getting the grease that it needs, then the maintenance is not being done. But if you see the communications getting to the most junior person, or the grease is getting to the most remote bearing, then you've got a good ship, or you've got a good organization.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great.
Kind of build on that, a lot of those programs, and we're putting a lot of effort into succession planning now. And traditionally you think of that of, okay, we need the next top person or whatever, but that really has to emanate throughout the whole entire organization, all levels, and having a pathway that these folks are demonstrating that they're capable, they're putting the effort into bettering our organization, and so we need to have that pathway for them to rise with their successes. It is somewhat of a challenge, and especially in a technical group. As you mentioned, a lot of engineers happen to be introverts, and that can be mistaken from someone that's an extrovert and clearly shines. That doesn't mean the introvert that's keeping it inside is any less valuable. They have just as much to bring to the team, and that's again where it's incumbent to meet them at their comfort level and help coach them to the level of success that they're capable of.
Yeah, and every introvert needs to read the book Quiet, about introverts. And now I can't remember the author's name, but really, really good book. And extroverts need to read it too if they work with introverts, but really helps explain what goes through our brain sometimes and how to help get that out. So,
well, on the positive side, a lot of our great leaders have been introverts because they're very good listeners.
Right. Yeah. Well, and listening is a vital skill to that too, right? Is, be able, and not to just hear the words, right? But to be able to hear the meaning behind the words, which is why I WebEx was a great tool, but to totally rely on that with meeting with people was a challenge, because so much of our communication is nonverbal, and you just don't get that in a virtual environment. And so, in fact, I had a meeting earlier today, and somebody asked me a question, I gave an answer, and they had two different responses. They heard two different things, two different people, because one was watching me when I said the answer, and one was not good or bad. It just, my body language they were able to interpret what I meant by my body language, as opposed to not being able to see what I said, right, or how my body language acted. So important to listening and leading. And just to jump back a little bit on the you mentioned micromanaging, and I'm going to pull a John Wooden story, because one of the stories that sticks out of me in his book is about teaching the players how to roll their socks and put their socks on. That's not micromanaging, that's training, right? But that was how he started every year. And so training is just such a vital piece of that. And part of that's where are you in the organization, and what kind of leader did you hire into the positions, and kind of where do you put the guardrails on, right? And so that's going to be different depending on where you are in the organization.
Correct. That's
so
adaptiveness.
Right, that adaptive piece, right?
Yep.
Yeah, we're all different. We have to be led in different ways, right? So
I was listening to a story with Bo Bridges, actor Bo Bridges. He actually was on the UCLA team back in the early 60s. And first day of practice, learning to put socks on.
Right.
25 years later, he took his son to try out for UCLA, went to the first practice, and they're putting their socks on. And he's like, 25 years later, you still haven't learned anything.
Yeah, well, there was a reason he won, 10 championships? And it was all that, that repeated behavior that he did over and over again. Great leader, great book, great coach. So as we wrap up, any tools, wisdom you'd like to share with our leaders or listeners that you just kind of didn't get a chance to talk through yet?
I can't stress enough having your leadership toolbox ready to go. You want to be ready day one. I've seen it over and over where very competent folks are going through their career, get a leadership position, and then they decide, okay, now I got to learn to be a leader, and they're just not ready. You want to see that. You want to be running right at the beginning.
Right. Well, and depending on where we are in our careers, we may have other leadership positions outside of work before we ever get them at work, right? As a parent, a lot of us become parents before we actually have leadership positions, in the job world, and yet you're a leader, right? Or you're a leader at church, or a leader with scouts or a sports team, So it's not just, now I got the title supervisor,
correct?
Right. So, Charles.
I'd just say, it's always important to keep in mind what you're leading is the what and the why,
Mm-hmm.
the mission and why we're doing that, not the how. And that's a very common. I got to be a leader. I've got to be a trailblazer, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
That's not the case. Your team will help you get to the destination if you clearly define what that is.
The why, right?
The why,
or the intent, as you
correct.
mentioned. And the great thing about here, we have a great why, right? I mean, we serve the community, create a better future. And, when I talk to newcomers, our newcomer orientation or whatever, it's everybody that works for Pasco County has the ability to improve somebody's life that day, during that 8-hour, 10-hour, 24-hour period, depending on, where you work. And so that's such a great why, we just make mistakes when we stray away from that why. So
it's natural to get to the how, though. I think
Right.
that's part of natural life. And I can tell you that I apparently do not load the dishwasher properly. So I do not load a dishwasher. So that's the danger of getting into the how.
the how,
Yeah.
So yeah, well, I'm with you on some of those things.
Yeah.
So, no, I appreciate it. Well, thanks for stopping by. We've got a little thing called a lightning round. So, some of these questions I repeat and some I don't. Kind of just depends. But really a chance to get those that listen a chance to know you a little bit better. No right or wrong answers. So I'll start with the traditional, The Office or Parks and Rec.
For myself, definitely The Office.
Okay.
Parks and Rec.
See, there we go. We're split. Yeah, Keith will appreciate you more now. Dawn or dusk?
I'd say dawn.
Dawn?
I'm without a doubt Dawn.
Yeah, I was going to say you'd have to be, right?
Correct.
So what's the place you most want to travel right now?
So if I had the opportunity, I would definitely go back to Palau.
Okay.
It's by far my favorite destination. Scuba diving is out of this world, and it's basically untouched.
Right. Yeah. Is there some World War II wrecks there too?
Yes.
And that's drift diving, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
I've had the opportunity to take 2 ships there.
Okay.
Absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, we spent some time on Guam, but never got to Palau. So
I spent a little time this summer driving by myself from Tampa to Seattle.
Oh,
It was a long drive, and I flew back though, so it was a good. But of all the places I stopped, Colorado was absolutely beautiful, and that's where I would go back to.
Yeah, what part of Colorado?
I went up the eastern part.
Okay.
Denver was beautiful, and then
A front slope.
Yep.
Yeah, no, Colorado's gorgeous. The mountains are gorgeous.
Yes.
Whether you're in Colorado or Montana or Wyoming, the Rockies are it's hard to beat the view from different places there. So, so what's your favorite season?
My favorite season would have to be fall football.
UCLA football. I've seen them on the wall. Yeah. Especially a few years ago when A&M went to.
So I would say winter, but I've lived in Florida my whole life, so it's a Florida winter. Yeah.
All right. So I appreciate y'all for being here. I hope I've really enjoyed the chance to talk some more about leadership and how we serve the public and what we do, and I hope you all have enjoyed it as well. Especially want to thank our media relations team. They make this effort possible. And then thank you for joining us for this episode of Pasco Podcast. I'm Dan Biles, and until the next one.
For more information on Pasco County government, please visit mypasco.net and check us out on Facebook and Twitter.